Welcome into the Lakers Report by Chat Sports. I'm Chase Sr. Appreciate all of you for making today's show a part of your day. And speaking of today's show, it is a loaded one at that. A Gordon Hayward, Russell Westbrook trade potentially gaining steam going into the NBA offseason. Of course, in the NBA, when you trade a superstar player like Russell Westbrook, who's set to make around $47 million here this upcoming year, you have to find another contract to match that in order for a trade to work if it's a player-for-player swap. Now, you take a look at both players, and we'll, of course, get to that report from Jake Fischer and Marc Stein. Russell Westbrook, for him, the numbers have always really popped off at the screen, but the eye test tells you a completely different story about Russ. Now, you can say, if you're a Russell Westbrook fan, that the fit with LeBron James and Anthony Davis didn't work, and his on-court style clashed with what Frank Vogel wanted to do. But with Russell Westbrook, we're talking about a declining player whose numbers are going down, and if he's on a different team next year, this tells the complete story about Russell Westbrook. It'll be his fifth team in 5 years. So declining player, athleticism still somewhat there, but that's even going down just a tad. And this is a player who, as a guard, as a point guard, is a little bit too reckless. He's a little bit too singular focused in trying to just go for the kill shot, and he doesn't have a good feel for the game, and he's way too expensive at that $47 million number. Now, I think it's smart for the Lakers to explore a trade of Russ. The problem for Los Angeles, there aren't a lot of destinations out there and teams that want to take a declining player in Russell Westbrook, a guy who at that guard spot cannot shoot the basketball. And when you focus in on Gordon Hayward, the numbers this past year were solid. I like the game. He can do a couple of nice things offensively, but ever since he snapped his ankle back on opening night a couple years ago at the Boston Celtics after landing that monster contract extension, injury issues have continued to really haunt him. Now, in 2022, despite missing a lot of games, average about 16 points per game, 7 rebounds per, connected on about 46% of his field goals, which is pretty efficient, and shot around 39% from beyond the arc. So the raw numbers for Gordon Hayward, pretty solid. Could his on-court fit be better on the Los Angeles Lakers with LeBron James and Anthony Davis when healthy? Maybe. I just don't know if this is the trade that the Lakers should make. Now, coming up next on the show, right around the corner, we'll get to that report from Jake Fischer and Marc Stein about this growing belief inside league circles that a Russ for Gordon swap could happen because Russell Westbrook is a Jordan brand guy, and of course Michael Jordan, the owner of the Charlotte Hornets. And also coming up later on today's show, Dwight Howard has let it be known that he wants to return and rock the purple and gold once again. But first, I want to field your answers in the comment section right now because I really do value all of your feedback that you do give us. So let me know which player you would rather have on this Lakers roster going into 2022-2023. Is it Gordon Hayward? Type GH. Is it Russell Westbrook? Type RW. Get those votes into the comment section right now. Much anticipated report from Jake Fischer. I thought this was pretty fascinating. The idea of moving Hayward's $30 million salary, he said, and additional contracts, such as Kelly Oubre or Mason Plumlee and a third smaller deal to Los Angeles for Russell Westbrook's expiring contract, has taken hold among league executives as first reported by Marc Stein. He continued by saying this: Russ would be owed $47 million next year if he picks up his player option, which would create significant financial flexibility for the Hornets in the summer of 2023. But the idea of LA adding another expensive player with extensive injury history may be too much for the Lakers to stomach. And we talk about Hayward being expensive and injury prone. This contract, if he was 100% healthy given the numbers, would be right up there with like a Tobias Harris level player. But Tobias Harris plays a lot of games for Philly, rarely misses any time. The same cannot be said for Gordon Hayward. This year, made a shade under $30 million. Next year, it is even at $30 million. The year after that, 2023-24, $31.5 million. And he's injured once again. He had his postseason press conference to wrap up the year, and he hobbled to get up to the press conference table. his foot is in a cast because he has a bone fracture in that foot. And once again, going into the offseason, there are injury concerns hovering around Gordon Hayward and coming off a year that the Lakers just had when AD was hurt and LeBron was hurt and a couple of other players were suffering injury issues. They're kind of haunted by that. And a new coach coming into Los Angeles with pressure on them does not want to deal with a disastrous season like Frank Vogel had to deal with and handle this past year. Hayward missing 28 games last year and then missed even more games this past year, missing 34 because of that lingering issue. And a lot of the injury problems that he's had, they've all been lower body injuries, and I think that's overcompensation. That's just a little bit of compensation in his body weakening after that horrific injury that he suffered against the Cleveland Cavaliers on opening night back a couple years ago. And from that point on, since suffering that catastrophic injury, he's lost a little bit of pop athletically, even though the numbers and the shooting numbers have been somewhat solid when you take a look at some of the shooting numbers, but the injury issues have really impacted Gordon Hayward. So coming up next on the show, we'll get into Dwight Howard and him wanting to return to LA. I actually ran into Dwight Howard at the Whole Foods in Dallas when the Lakers were in town to play the Mavericks back a couple weeks ago. Huge in stature. I think it's kind of phony when people just go up to celebrities and athletes and they just like snap a selfie. I did not. I just gave Dwight the, yeah, what up, Dwight? And he was like, yo, what's good? And he was with a fine little dime piece. So what is your level of interest in Gordon Hayward? My next question for the audience here, Laker Nation, get into the comments section, get that thing popping. Your level of interest in Gordon Hayward is what? I want you to scale it for me from 1 to 100. 1, I don't want the player at all. I'd rather have Russ. 100, let's take a chance on the injuries. I like the game. Let's go all in, get those votes in. Now, before we get to Dwight, here's a look at the Western Conference playoff odds. Of course, Los Angeles on the outside looking in of the NBA playoff picture, but the Western Conference and the Eastern Conference races are going to be fascinating. I mean, there are so many good teams top to bottom, and the talent pool in the NBA is ridiculous. But Western Conference odds, Suns leading the charge at plus 115, followed by the Warriors at 5-1 odds. Memphis coming in at 6-1 odds. Dallas Mavericks with the uncertainty around Luka Doncic expected to not play, according to Shams Charania. The Mavericks at 10-1 odds, and then Utah Jazz rounding things out at 12-1 odds. If you want to get your bets in during the NBA playoffs, BetUS is the spot to do it. 125% deposit bonus. If you plug in that link at the bottom of your screen, chatsports.com/Lakers, as well as that promo code to my right, Lakers125. Let's say you put down $100 using that link in that promo code, you get an additional $125 to game with. Dwight Howard, does he want to come back to the Los Angeles Lakers? He said as much this week. And as a depth center, I don't really hate Dwight Howard's game, even though he's been in the league for a long time, going back to, the early to mid-2010s. I mean, the dude's been balling for a long time. I think he's a bona fide future Hall of Famer. When he was with the Magic, MVP, finals appearance, he was awesome, like straight up awesome. At this point, obviously, he's not that guy anymore, but I thought with LA back in 2020 during the bubble season, last year with Philly, this year, he's a pretty good rotational depth center. He said this when asked about returning to Los Angeles. Do I want to come back? Why would I want to leave? I want to be cemented somewhere. I love being here. I love the fans. I would just really like an opportunity to where I can really go out with a bang. I've only got a couple of years left, so I want an opportunity where I can go out and show my skills and talent and do it in the right way, but also win. I feel like I deserve that. As for what Howard did last year on the oldest roster in the history of the NBA, he certainly played a role in that, but unlike some of the other old dusty cats, he can actually still play. 6 points per game, almost 6 rebounds per. That's really good production given the amount of time that he was getting on a night-in, night-out basis. Connected on about 61% of his field goals. That's easy because he's there for putbacks, dunks, alley-oops off that pick and roll because he can still do that at a pretty good level. And a pretty good rim protector as well, giving the Lakers about a half block per night, in addition to all of the other intangibles he brings to the table. And I kind of like him as a clubhouse guy and a leader as well because he's been around the block and has taken a lot of young players under his wing over the last couple of years, really repairing his image from when he played with Kobe in LA. And we know that that was a disastrous stint because Kobe did not like Dwight at the time because he thought he was soft as charming. Do you want Dwight to come back to Laker Nation. My final question for you, treat that comment section like a Sports Talk Radio call-in line. R for return, L for leave. Appreciate all of you for watching today's show. Dedicated to Sammy Boy. We'll see you next time here on the Lakers Report.